Sunday dinners in 1960s Britain. In the 1960s Britain, Sunday dinner wasn't just about eating, it was a tradition that defined the week. At a time when television had just entered most homes, supermarkets were only beginning to grow, and meals were still largely cooked from scratch. The Sunday roast was a symbol of togetherness. Families gathered around the table after church or Sunday walks, filling kitchens with the aroma of roasting meat, crispy potatoes, and rich gravy. More than a meal, Sunday dinners in 1960s. Britain captured the warmth of home, the rhythm of family life, and a proud sense of British tradition. The weekly ritual of family life. The Sunday dinner was the highlight of the week in the 1960s Britain. While weekdays were often filled with quick, frugal meals, fish fingers, beans on toast, or cottage pie, Sundays were sacred. Mothers began preparations early, peeling vegetables and seasoning the joint of meat, while fathers were often assigned to carve. Families typically ate in the afternoon, around 2 or 3 p.m., allowing time for digestion before a light evening tea. The importance of this meal stretched beyond nourishment. It reinforced family bonds and reminded everyone of the value of pausing life's busyness for a shared moment. In an era when extended families often lived close, it wasn't uncommon for grandparents, uncles, or cousins to join the table, turning Sunday into a family reunion of sorts. Even in working-class households, the Sunday dinner was treated as special. Mothers polished the best cutlery and crockery, reserved for the occasion. For many children, Sunday was the one day they sat upright at the table for a formal meal, an early lesson in manners and family pride. The roast, the star of the show. The undisputed centerpiece of a Sunday dinner in the 1960s. Britain was the roast. Beef was the ultimate choice, particularly when served with Yorkshire puddings, but lamb and pork were popular alternatives. Chicken, now an everyday meat, was still considered a treat in the early 1960s. In fact, until the late 1950s, chicken was expensive and often reserved for Christmas. As industrial farming spread, chicken gradually became more affordable, marking a shift in the way British households viewed meat. The roast was prepared with care, seasoned simply with salt and pepper, perhaps garlic or rosemary if available. It roasted for hours in the oven, basted repeatedly to keep it juicy, filling the house with mouth-watering aromas. The carving was a ritual in itself, often done at the table by the father, giving the occasion an almost ceremonial feel. This was a far cry from weekday meals, which were quicker, plainer, and cheaper. The Sunday roast reminded families that despite economic challenges, there was always one day to look forward to with abundance. Potatoes, galore, crispy, mashed, or boiled. If the roast was the star, then potatoes were the trusted supporting cast. In the 1960s Britain, no Sunday dinner was complete without them, and households often served them in more than one form. Roast potatoes, golden, crisp, and cooked in beef dripping, were non-negotiable. The crunch as you bit into one gave way to fluffy insides, making them unforgettable. But many families didn't stop there. Mashed potatoes, creamy and buttery, provided a soft contrast to the crunch of the roasties. In larger families, boiled potatoes might also appear, especially if the roast was modest in size. Potatoes were affordable, filling, and versatile, making them the backbone of the meal. Children often had their preferences. Some fought for the crispiest roasty, while others delighted in mountains of mash. Either way, the potato was a Sunday staple, showing up in generous heaps on plates across the nation. Vegetables, seasonal and straightforward. Vegetables on the Sunday table were simple but plentiful. Britain in the 1960s still ate largely seasonally, with much produce bought from local greengrocers or grown on allotments. Carrots, peas, parsnips, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts were mainstays. Cauliflower cheese sometimes made an appearance, especially when families wanted to dress up the meal. Frozen vegetables were only just becoming popular in the 1960s, thanks to the rise of bird's eye. A bag of frozen peas might be kept in the freezer for convenience, but most families still preferred fresh produce. Unlike today's emphasis on elaborate side dishes, vegetables in the 60s were usually boiled, buttered, and placed simply on the plate. Children often dreaded the sprouts or cabbage, but mothers insisted they were eaten before dessert. Still, the vegetables gave color and balance to a plate otherwise dominated by meat and potatoes. Yorkshire puddings and gravy, the comforting companions. A true Sunday dinner would have felt incomplete without gravy. In the 1960s, gravy was made the old-fashioned way, from meat juices, flour, and stock cubes. It was whisked until smooth, rich, and velvety, then poured liberally over meat, potatoes, and vegetables. Yorkshire puddings, originally designed to stretch meals in northern England, became a national favorite by the 1960s. Though traditionally paired only with beef, many households served them regardless of the roast. Puffy, golden, and crispy on the outside with a soft center, they were ideal for soaking up gravy. Children delighted in filling their Yorkshire puddings with gravy until they overflowed, while adults appreciated the nostalgic comfort they brought. This combination, Yorkshire pudding and gravy, remains one of the most iconic images of a British Sunday dinner, cementing its place in food history. Puddings and desserts, sweet rewards. If vegetables were endured, dessert was the reward. In the 1960s Britain, Sunday puddings were hearty, homemade, and filling. Rice pudding, baked until it formed a golden skin, was a classic. Jam, roly-poly, sweat puddings, treacle sponge, and spotted dick with custard were regular appearances. These dishes stretched ingredients while providing comfort, warmth, and a sweet ending to the week's most important meal. Homemade custard, made with bird's custard powder, was almost always present, poured generously over sponge puddings or fruit crumbles. Apple crumble itself became more widespread in the 60s, often using windfall apples from the garden. Unlike later decades when instant desserts like Angel Delight took center stage, the 1960s remained loyal to traditional puddings. These desserts, though simple, left a lasting impression, etched into the collective memory of British families. The social side, gathering, conversation, and traditions. More than food, Sunday dinners were social events. Families came together, often inviting neighbors or relatives. It was one of the few meals where formality mattered. Everyone sat at the table, elbows off, and waited until everyone was served before eating. Conversations flowed, covering school, work, local gossip, and national news. With televisions still relatively new, many households kept them off until after dinner. The ritual encouraged real conversation, laughter, and the occasional family disagreement. In working-class neighborhoods, sharing food was a sign of generosity. A neighbor might pop by for a plate, or a grandparent might bring homemade chutney or jam to accompany the meal. These gatherings gave the Sunday roast a role beyond sustenance. It became a tradition that tied people to one another. The shift of the late 1960s. By the late 1960s, Britain was changing. Supermarkets were expanding, women were increasingly entering the workforce, and convenience foods were sneaking onto dinner tables. Frozen peas, tinned fruit cocktail, and powdered gravy mixes like Bisto began to appear alongside traditional fare. These mixes were an easier alternative to making gravy from scratch, though many households still preferred the rich flavor of homemade versions. While the powdered mixes saved time, they did not yet dominate kitchens. The full instant granule variety would only arrive later, in the late 1970s. Yet, despite these shifts, the Sunday roast endured. It may have adapted, shortcuts here and there, but the essence remained the same. It was still the meal that symbolized comfort, togetherness, and British identity. Even today, when life moves faster and takeaways are common, the Sunday dinner continues to be remembered fondly, as one of the nation's most enduring food traditions. Sunday dinners in 1960s Britain were more than meals. They were traditions that united families, filled kitchens with comfort, and marked the rhythm of the week. With roasts, puddings, and conversations shared around the table, they embodied the warmth of home life, leaving a legacy still cherished across the UK today. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell